Primary speaker tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Peter Williams, who we share an accord here because he's been away and come back, and he came back and stayed, and I just come back and visit. Peter is going to give us the Immortal Memory. Now, he's actually done this in Spain, Portugal, Chile, Norway, and in England. Okay, so he's had a bit of practice. So we're expecting some pretty good stuff here tonight. But he tells me that when he was actually in Spain, he went over to Spain and he stayed in Spain. He's quite a keen golfer. And he tells me that he was out there and he was just about to hit the ball, you know. And in the clubhouse, there was the tannoy. And she says, this voice comes over, you know, and it said, "Will the golfer teeing off from the ladies' tee please return to the gents' tee?" And Peter's standing there, and of course he hadn't moved, you know. And then louder, it says, "Will the golfer teeing off on the ladies' tee please return to the first tee?" So he's standing there and he's looking at, you know, he's getting more flustered. And the tannoy comes up, "Will the golfer teeing off on the ladies' tee please return to the gents' tee?" And he threw the club down and he turned around and he shouts out, "Will the man on the tannoy please let me take my second shot?" So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Peter from the Immortal Memory.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter, for that introduction. I think that that little story sums up one of the first rules that I was taught about public speaking. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Well, President Andrew, ladies and gentlemen, guests, it is my great pleasure that I stand before you tonight to propose the toast to the immortal memory of Robert Burns. Now, you all know, or at least you should know, that Burns was born in 1759 and he died in 1796. And for those with an arithmetic bent, that meant he was 37 years old when he sadly passed away, a victim of a harsh life. You also know he fathered numerous children, some of them wedlock, maybe life wasn't that hard, and was prolific in his writing of songs and poems. Now, there have been many other great poets and writers throughout the world. I mean, the Chileans, my wife Lynette, has Pablo Neruda, the Spanish have Lorca or Cervantes, the Irish, Oscar Wilde, the English have Shakespeare, Rudyard Kipling, the Americans Longfellow, the Germans Goethe. All of them, perhaps talents, you could say, equal that of Rabi. But none have an annual feast in their honour. Not the great Barnes Shakespeare, not James Joyce, or even Oscar Wilde, despite the Irish love of a good party. So why is it we're seated here together tonight to celebrate the life of Robert Burns? Well, I think it's fair to say Scotland itself has a few idiosyncrasies. For instance, it's the only country in the world where Coca-Cola is not the #1 soft drink. You know others. It's also the country where a newspaper has the world record for the highest percentage circulation, and the clue is in the world record. So, with these things to our end, why not be the only country that celebrates a national poet? Well, hundreds, thousands of words, books, articles have been dedicated to his life, his work, his memory. Maybe trying to find an answer to the question of the lore and the attraction of Robert Burns. I'll attempt to show a little bit of light on this here tonight, but I'm afraid if you're looking to understand why we're the only country to celebrate our national poet, you're probably going to be disappointed. Anyway, to poetry. I think it's fair to say poetry has always been kind of special for me. I remember those times of childhood before television, many of us here are old enough to remember those days. My father used to recite poetry. Now he was English, so it wasn't Burns, but he was very fond of The Ancient Mariner, The Road to Mandalay, and he really relished The Lion and Albert. Now I started primary school in Edinburgh, the outskirts of Edinburgh, and at a very early age we learnt this poem, which I think is a non. Why is the furnace no put out? when the rain gangs down the funnel, why does the engine go toot toot? Is it feared to go through the tunnel? I'll soon be knocking at Grandma's door. She'll say, come in, my laddie. You can Kenrick swell, rel with a queerlick smell. The next stop's Kirkcaldy. We had many others from that prolific writer anon to go through. But maybe about 7 or 8 years old, we were introduced to To a Mouse. Thou saw the fields laid bare and waste, and weary winter coming fast, and cosy here beneath the blast thou sought to dwell, till crash the cool coulter passed out through thy cell. Now as a child I remember suffering with that wee sleekit timorous beastie with a panic in its breastie. The word pictures the birds conjures up took me to that cold winter field with the farmer, the plough, and the tragedy of the mouse losing its home. My other favourite was the Twa Dugs. Again, wonderful word pictures. The first Allan, they called him Caesar, was keep it for his honest pleasure. His hair, his size, his mouth, his lugs showed he was none of Scotland's dugs, but whalpit some place far abroad, where sailors gang to fish for cod. And I've always imagined Burns sitting there thinking at the end of that, you know, what the hell rhymes with abroad? Now, I don't know if Burns has ever been considered a children's writer, but I think he'd been very good. And he really captures the kind of childish spirit of, in the Two Dogs and the way that they see the world. It's kind of with a disarming innocence and honesty. And I've always felt that Two Dogs are like two children discussing the playground, discussing the world of adults in the playground. You know, their insights are those of fresh eyes, clear of prejudice and myopia which comes with growing old. And this, of course, is a large part of the genius of Burns, to see the world and reflect on what he sees in ways that make us sit up and think. Now, as a child, I was enthralled by the stories of the mouse and the Twa Dogs. As an adult, I take rather more out of these poems. And Burns turns the simple, particularly in To a Mouse, into something profound. What to me is so brilliant about it is he starts the poem with a story of a simple event. A mouse being turned out of its nest by the plough. I mean, many would think nothing of it. Most farmers certainly wouldn't. His first thoughts are compassion for the wee animal and helplessness that he can't do anything to relieve its plight. But then he turns into a lesson from humanity, a true moral philosopher. But Mousie, thou art know thy lane, when thinking foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after gley, and leave us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. Still, thou art blessed, compared with me, the present only toucheth thee, but off I backward cast my ear on prospects drear, and forward though I cannot see, I guess and fear. In these words he's summing up what it is to be human, the toil and the trouble, but also the conscience and the morality. It's maybe too much to think, I don't know, but also the mouse was a symbol of the tenant farmer, or rather the precarious situation of the tenant farmer. There were many suffering at that, and in that time of the agricultural revolution, similar, maybe fatal decanting from the mouse. In a similar way, he takes the Twa Dugs from simple descriptions of the lives they lead to reflect on some of the less savoury aspects of the times they lived in. And these lines from Lurth, the poorer dog, reflect the same sentiment as To a Mouse. There's mony a creditable stock of decent, honest, foursome folk are riven out baith root and branch, some rascals prideful greed to quench, while thinks to net himself the faster in favour with some gentle master. Wavelings down Parliamentin, for Britain's good, his soul indentin. Caesar, of course, puts him straight on the ideas of politicians actually trying to serve their country or do good. And like many aspects of his poet, these lines are ageless. Hey lad, you little ken aboot it. For Britain's good, good faith I'll do't it. Say, rather go on as premiers lead him, and saying ayes or noes they bid him. We've only recently seen the results of some politicians not toeing the party line. But again, he observes and writes, exposing both the hypocrisy of the world of politicians and the naivety of the common man to put their trust in them. Then he kind of turns psychologist when he talks about the world of the aristocrats. But human bodies are such fools for all their colleges and schools that when their real ills perplex them, they make themselves enough to vex them. And either less they hate to hurt them, in like proportion less will hurt them. But this is not the hellfire and damnation of the Holy Willies, but more a subtle, humorous rebuke of the foibles of the human race. In politicians' terms, perhaps more Ken Clarke than Norman Tebbit. This insight psychologically, I think he's on a par with Shakespeare in the way that he exposes the idiosyncrasies of his fellow men, and to make that exposure both meaningful and entertaining, particularly. But Shakespeare wrote of Macbeth, of Hamlet, of Caesar, kings and emperors to get across his messages and to entertain. I don't think he would ever express the view that the rank is but the guinea stamp, a man's a man for all that. Burns, of course, is a contemporary of the French Revolution. He believed in liberty, equality, and obviously fraternity. His poems and songs reflect the life and aspirations of decent folk trying to survive in a turbulent world. He wasn't a stranger to his share of trouble either, but it often proved an occasion to demonstrate his wit. And in an early stage, he'd actually been caught with an illicit still in his house and was accused of producing illegal whiskey. In his defence, he said to the magistrate, but no whiskey was actually found on the premises. Well, the magistrate was having none of it. He said, no, but you've got the tackle. Well, Burns replied immediately, in that case, I'd like 7 cases of rape to be taken into consideration. The bemused magistrate just said, well, there are no women here claiming sexual misdemeanors at the moment. Burns said, no, but I've got the tackle. Back to the poetry and to a louse. He takes his, what again, a pretty mundane occurrence, seeing a headline crawl over a girl's hair, and uses the poem to deliver what I at least consider to be 2 of the most profound lines in the English language. Oh, would some power the gift of years to see ourselves as others see us. It would for many a blunder free us and foolish notion. Now, I think this is not only profound in the sense of seeing ourselves as others see us. I think this is a very visionary, but very forward-looking statement. Because if you think of the time when Holy Willie was talking about predetermination and Caesar's owners, their place in society, the very last things on people's minds was to see themselves as others see them. And in fact, the church and aristocracy would have had something to say about that because they thought that was their role to tell people. So this was a man of immense talent with words, but I think surprising insights as well into the human condition, and definitely a man of forward thinking. And I think these alone may be more than enough to merit celebrating his memory. But apart from all this, I think he avoided becoming obsessed with fame. All he did, he never loses his sense of humour or modesty. And I recently heard at a wedding his epistle to a young friend, and I can't think of better words of advice to a young man. But then he finishes with a piece of self-deprecating humour designed to render the message that much more acceptable to the reader. Adieu, fair amiable youth, your heart can ne'er be wanting. May prudence, fortitude and truth erect your brow undaunting. In ploughman's phrase, God send you speed till daily to grow wiser, and may you better reck the reed than ever did the adviser. I have known Robert Burns for about 60 years plus, more or less. Difficult to imagine. From child to father to grandfather, he has followed me, entertained me, taught me, and made me laugh. He has enriched my life and that of millions of others. I have my own personal reasons for wanting to celebrate his life and memory, and I'm sure each one of you can say the same. To reiterate, he never claimed any genius or status, and I'd like to leave you with these lines which again reflect that modesty. Some rhyme a neighbour's name to lash, some rhyme vain thought for needful cash, some rhyme to court the country clash and raise a din. For me a name I never fash, I rhyme for fun. And if you allow me to get my drink, I will propose the toast to the... So please be upstanding and propose the immortal memory of Robert Burns.
Hey, thank you very much, Peter. It's quite interesting. Before anybody gets any panic attacks, I'm not going to do a Colin Welland and say that the Brits are back like he did at the Oscars many, many years ago after the Chariots of Fire, but it has been pointed out to me a couple of things. One is that there are one or two Englishmen actually taking part in tonight's proceedings, which I make no apologies for. And the second one is an apology that I do need to make, because apparently this is not only on behalf of me, but all male MCs who apparently say, okay, we'll take a 5-minute comfort break, and it immediately sets panic amongst all the females, I believe, in the audience, because that's about 5 seconds per female, apparently. So, but having said that, I did notice that the last people back into the room were all the males, so, but I'm sure that they were going to different places. So we're going to take an entertainment break.